Hello, everyone, and welcome to a fantastic interview session that I am very excited about. My name is Ed Mabrie, and with me is Pastor Joel, and Pastor Jonathan Fries, and Joel Swakowski. Did I mispronounce your name? Actually, if I did,
Nailed it. Nailed
hey,
it.
hey,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed.
great.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed.
From Music of Life Church, and of course, What the Flock, which is an awesome name for a podcast. I am really upset that I did not think of it first, but
Yes.
give you guys credit.
That's the best compliment right there, Ed. That's the best compliment.
Hey, we perceivers
Yeah.
know our humor, and yeah,
Yeah.
if you get a compliment from one of us on that, yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Or it is great, rather.
Yeah.
I'll be cruising on that affirmation all afternoon.
I am glad.
Great interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you
All
go.
right.
Good
Yeah.
night, folks.
Thanks, Ed.
So,
Yeah.
listen, we are going to talk about a subject today that is controversial, that's triggering, that is provocative, and that I think is very brave for you guys to tackle it. And the what we're going to talk about today is racism. And just hearing the word, I think everyone that kind of cringes, kind of the hairs go up on the back of your neck. You're like, what? Uh-oh. You crouch into your karate pose because you know it's going to be something that is, again, it's very triggering, it's very provocative, and
Yeah.
everyone has an opinion about it, no matter what level you are affected by it, or no matter what level it affects you. And everyone, no matter what your race happens to be, we're going to kind of talk about some of those definitions. You feel it, you're affected by it, especially here, all over the world, but especially here in the West, where we become hypersensitive about it, for better or worse. So I had the opportunity to listen to a couple of shows that you both did on the subject of racism, and you guys, just really tackling it in a great way, and doing a great job as usual. So my first question for you, I guess I'll just start with the basics. Why did you decide to make this a topic for What the Flock? Why did you? This isn't something you had to tackle. I mean, your show is normally about very heady biblical doctrinal issues and mental health issues and things like that in general. But why would you kick this hornet's nest? Why did you decide to do a show
Yeah.
on racism?
For that reason, Ed.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Season 7 is all about tackling controversial topics, and there is no way that you could do a controversial, series without talking about racism. You know, uh, in our culture, I mean, this is a situation that is not going away.
Mm,
It's getting more emotional as time goes on. It's not less. So therefore, we have an increasing problem, in our society and in the world. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to approach it, because we keep trying to solve the issue
mm,
and we're making it worse,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Telling people stop being racist, stop doing this, stop doing that. Be nice to people. Just do it, okay, Ed? Jeez, what's wrong with you? Like this is getting worse. So that's why we wanted to talk about it, to actually give a dissolve approach to the topic.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, so we're trying to find these what are the most controversial topics so that we can prove out the point of season 7 is if you have the right style or mindset when you're communicating over a topic, you can talk about anything. And it can result in both sides of a topic coming out ahead, learning something, and maybe just empathizing with somebody on the other side. But also because of everything we presented before season 7, I think part of it, I'm excited about the racism episode is up there with my most excited about addressing like a topic that we've addressed because I think it could really help a lot of people because I think we really do, apart from, focusing on how do we just understand somebody when we're talking about race,
Right.
some of the, some of the specifics we give as far as the cause of racism and all that,
Mhm.
and why it's an issue is stuff that we really wanted to talk about and break down this issue in a way that I don't think many people recognize it. So
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
we're trying to kick the hornet's nest, if you will. Yeah,
Well, bravo, kudos to you. So
yeah,
what I'm hearing is that during the season, no matter what the problem is, dissolve is the solution. So as they say, if you have if your only weapon is a hammer, everything's a nail. But in this case, dissolve is the hammer, and every problem really is a nail. Everything can be dissolved.
It can, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it takes a completely different approach to
Right.
it. And that's what I love about what Joel said. I love what you're doing right now, Ed, because this goes back to understanding. If
Mhm.
I can sit down and have a conversation with somebody about racism and understand them, it's kind of like, ooh, I could probably understand a lot more things about them and what they believe.
Yeah, I guess if you
So we're
start
kind
with
of
go ahead.
yeah, go
And I guess
ahead.
if you start with the most difficult thing, then everything else is downhill after that.
There you go.
There you go.
It's like
Okay.
if you can help your relatives, you can help your family, you can help anybody. If you can have a
Oh,
conversation, if you can have a conversation with somebody about racism and understand their perspective, maybe you can have a conversation about anything.
Yeah.
well, next you got to need to go to Congress and get them to all agree. Get
Yeah,
them all.
right.
Anyway,
Yep.
but no, great explanations. Thank you guys. So that's again with the basics again. So you've told me why you want to do this topic. So we'll talk about a definition. What is your definition? Because we know that definitions are the key to mental health and probably the key to, I assume the first step in dissolve. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but what is your definition of racism?
Yeah, the one, I guess the one we started with in this episode is the one that most people would agree on. It is when, this idea of categorizing a group of people based on what race or ethnicity they are, particularly minorities or marginalized peoples, and and prejudicing them based off of that ethnicity or race. So that is like the definition we presented, where it's like we think everybody would get on board with this is typically what people think racism is, and they typically all know it's wrong.
Right.
What later on in the episode we did kind of tackle this idea of a more broad definition, which is the belief that different races possess different characteristics. I think this
Mhm.
is a more inclusive definition. I think this is a definition that the more emerging or emergent world would gravitate towards, but it actually introduces even further contradictions when we try to deny racism as if it doesn't that as if it shouldn't exist, but we're saying racism is a belief that different races possess different distinct qualities or characteristics, when it's like, well, and that's something we talk about in the episode, is like, well, certain races do have different characteristics. And so I guess both definitions I would say where they're similar is they would be identifying a group of people as unique based off of their ethnicity or race.
Mhm.
The first definition is, and we judge them poorly for it. And the second definition is, and it's just a fact that they're different. So
Yeah,
those are
yeah.
the two definitions we kind of balanced through the
Okay.
episode.
Sure. And let me give you my definition, because just to be fair, and which is very
Right.
close to yours, and which is my definition is of racism is when you take a group of people and put them into a category based on physical features and then make blanket pejorative judgments and opinions of them based on the category that you've put them in.
Mm,
So that
so you are putting somebody in a category. You are you're deciding what qualities fit in that category. Like
right,
the individual or the group is deciding you go in this category for this reason, and then you judge them based upon your own category and how you put them there.
right. And we're going to touch on that, but yeah, but yeah, you're getting ahead of me in a
And
good way because I want to talk a little bit more about
can
that.
I want
Okay,
to make sure
cool.
too,
Yeah,
because
sure.
judging poorly too, right? Pejorative,
Yes,
you
yes,
use the
pejorative,
term.
yes,
So
judging poorly.
a negative judgment too.
Right.
And negative.
Because
Okay, cool.
one thing I want to get your thoughts on, this just kind of, came to me while you were talking about this. Is, yes, are there differences? Obviously. I mean, those who are looking at this can tell that I don't look exactly like you.
Right.
I look different than you. I have darker skin. I'm an African American. So is there a difference? Sure, there is. But I think the difference between understanding that races are different versus racism is, I think, is being vertical versus being horizontal. I think horizontally, hey, Joel and Jonathan, you're white. You have these characteristics. That's great. Ed, you're black. You have these characteristics. That's great. You have good things to offer. I have good things to offer. That's a horizontal line. I think when you go vertical, it is your skin color. I have this skin color. And because of that, I can vertically be higher than you, or you're
Okay.
lower than me. So when you do it
Nice.
horizontally, I think that's what we call diversity. Yeah, you have something to bring to the table. You have
We're all
experience.
different.
Yeah, you two have experiences that I haven't had, not just because of what you look like, but because of the lives you live, because of the culture you've come from, where your experiences in life. I can learn from that. And same thing, same with me. Horizontally, we're all equally valuable. We're not equal in that we're the same, but we are equal in that we all have something to bring to the table. Whereas vertically, it's more like, well, my experiences make me better than you or less than you. So
Mm.
what do you think about that?
Well, so what you're saying, Ed, is like I hear you say you are different in this way, so I have a reason to look up to you. I
Mm,
have a reason, like there are different qualities in you that is unique from me, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever,
right,
and that gives me a reason to look up to you. If we were the same, I couldn't look up to you.
right,
And
Right.
I would
Yeah,
say
that's
that
good.
and the reason why I add is like this horizontal approach with this vertical mentality only of there's something that I can
mm,
look up to in everybody. Is there a way that I can look up to everybody, meaning there's something that I celebrate in everyone that is different and unique and something that I admire in everybody?
I love that. So we can have an XY axis in a good way.
Bingo.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you,
Exactly.
Jonathan. I love that. I love how that expands what I said. That's awesome. Because I can tell you a quick conversation that I was having with a person who I work with who is very much a feminist. Like, I guess you call it third wave feminist. She is very much, I wouldn't say she's beyond pro woman. She's like, she's almost to the point where women are infallible, which
Okay.
isn't the point. But the point is, one of the things she said to me, she says, well, every woman is beautiful. Every woman is beautiful. I'm like, well, if that's true, then what you've just said is that there's no such thing as beauty, because beauty is a scale. If everyone is the same, if everyone is beautiful, then there's no beauty. Beauty. The reason I know a rose is more beautiful than a dirt rock because there's a scale. Because there's now that doesn't mean that dirt rock isn't valuable, but it's
Right.
not. But you can't judge it on the same scale as beauty. So if we're all the same, then there is no uniqueness and there's no value that I can get from you. If we're
Bingo.
if yeah, if Jonathan, if you and I were exactly the same, what can we learn from each other? We
Bingo.
can't grow.
Exactly. We
We're
don't
not
need it.
growing.
We don't need each other.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and we know a lot of that, where we should be focused on is the mental, emotional, spiritual differences of who
Yeah.
we are, right? But
Right.
I
Right.
think if we look at race and in other ways we're diverse in what you see physically,
Mhm.
it's so quickly seen as you're different, and that's uncomfortable and maybe even wrong.
Right.
But but is it really what God is doing? Is the ways we look diverse is supposed to be a representation of the way we're diverse internally,
Yeah.
and it should be celebrated, right?
Right.
Like, oh, you look different than me, ought to be a reminder of, ooh, they have something different to offer them too, like a good quality. Because
Right.
really what I was seeing is like this horizontal thing is just, it's factual. We're factually different.
Right.
Totally.
And because if you really want to get into it, it's like, well, it supersedes race too. It
Yeah.
goes into gender, it goes into hair color, eye color. We're all different. Not like me and Jonathan. If you really got to the percentages, I'm sure Jonathan and I are just as different from each other as I am from you.
Right. I would say that the least important thing about us is the color of our skin. That's like the least,
Right.
because there's
I
nothing
always
you can
say
wear.
it's when people, I always go, I'm not going to say this to somebody's face and say, you're lazy. You're categorically lazy, but that's just the way I feel. I'm
Right.
like, really? Really? It's like, it's so minimal.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
really. Where I
Yes.
see the vertical is more in how we're treating each other. And that's really where this really all comes down to is like,
Right.
I think one of the first things we need to do is recognize we races do look different and do have different, you know, like different characteristics. There's nothing wrong with recognizing that.
Sure.
The issue comes in is how are we treating people that look different from us and are in different
Yeah.
groups of people and different cultures and ethnicities.
I would love to know when this woman says all women are beautiful. Love to know what she means by
Yeah,
that.
what's beauty to
And
her?
Yeah,
I would
right.
love to know if men can be beautiful as well.
Actually, according to her, no, not in the same way, but that
She's never seen Jonathan.
I know I'm
obviously
asking
not.
the question,
He's
and I go,
he's a
Clearly,
can
beautiful
men be
man.
beautiful? Like
clearly.
I want to be. Yeah.
Well, we had, I don't want to derail this, but what we had, the conversation started because of there's a movement. I just kind of, I was making a kind of a joke to her, like, you know what, I go to Target, to shop for some whatever, and I'll see mannequins, and the mannequins of women are of all sizes. They're skinny mannequins and they're plus size mannequins. I said, but then I go to the men's section and all the mannequins are like rocked out. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. Why is it?
Yeah,
Why?
how do I know if that sweatshirt's going to cover my beer belly? Right?
Exactly.
Like, come
With
on.
And
yeah, the
so,
dad bod
the
mannequin.
dad bod, yeah.
The dad bod mannequin. Oh man, I'm gonna look really good in that pullover. That dad bod
Yeah,
mannequin's got it.
yeah,
and
yeah.
so my joke to her, which didn't go over well, was, why is it like, women are plus size, but men are just fat?
Oh
And,
man,
and she said, well,
yeah,
because women are all beautiful, and we are physically beautiful no matter what we are. And so what about men? Well, she said, well, not so much. And so that's, yeah. So maybe we'll do a conversation, hopefully with a woman on this show, about feminism and maybe some of the controversies about not feminism as equality, because women are equally valuable to men. I think that's what true feminism is. And I mean, when you get to the radical side, and again, don't want to derail it, but I just thought that was an interesting parallel with where how I
yeah,
think
very much.
she was defeating her own argument by saying we're all the same, we're all beautiful. So
Yeah,
I want to
I
get,
could see
yeah,
the parallel to the racism conversation for sure. Yeah,
Yep, a category, even if just
yeah,
men
yeah,
and
yeah,
women. Categorical thinking, analytical
yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Right.
yeah. So you touched a little bit on the spirituality, the spiritual standpoint, the biblical standpoint, and a lot of people, probably erroneously, but you can amplify this, have used the Bible to justify their racist attitudes, their racist beliefs. Now, of course, that's not the Bible's fault. I mean, if you try hard enough, you could use the Bible to justify a nuclear bomb if you wanted to. I mean, you can read anything into a text. But my question is does the Bible even deal with race? Is there a definition of race in the Bible? Does the Bible put people into racial, ethnic, national categories? And if it does put people into categories based on their genetics, is that problematic in any way?
Well, I think the Bible definitely recognizes different nations and different people groups, and a lot of times when you're reading, especially in the Old Testament, the people who weren't of Israel were even called foreigners or strangers. So I think it's definitely recognized that, and I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like I think it's addressed as a factual difference between the different people that live in our world. But God also says He's not a respecter of persons.
Hmm.
Now that doesn't mean, I think to your point, that doesn't mean we're all the same. It means we all are valuable. The value may be different based on who we are intrinsically, but God's not a respecter of persons, meaning like he's going to love everyone and does love everyone. And that's where it's like, so if you really understand the Bible, what even if there is like, in the Old Testament, it'll talk about these foreigners or strangers. And even in the New Testament, a lot of the writings of Paul is talking about Jews and Gentiles.
Mhm.
There's a difference.
Right.
But there is always a way. I think it was used as a way to just describe this people of Jerusalem or of Judaism or of the Israelites. And Paul talking about Jews and Gentiles, or believer, unbeliever, he's categorizing just to help us understand, what do these people believe? That's really the cause behind what he's getting to. And there was always a way, though, for people from foreign cultures or lands or foreign ethnicities to join these nations or other cultures as well, whether that was the Old Testament or even the New Testament. It's like that's the whole point really of Paul's ministry, wasn't it? To give the gospel to the Gentiles, to
Right.
these people who weren't of the Jewish race. So the I would say the Bible definitely recognizes there's a difference, but it also treats people spiritually the same, as if they all have not the same as if they're not unique, but it treats them the same as if they all do have value and they all are invited into this family if they want.
Okay. I'm going to push a little deeper into this, bring a little bit more attention because that's just what I do as a perceiver.
Great.
When Jesus himself, and you know this story well, when he was speaking to a Gentile woman, and she was pressing into him and was asking him for a miracle, for healing, and he referred to her, in a way, not directly but indirectly, as a dog. He says you shouldn't give the meat for the children. I'm not doing this. I'm paraphrasing. You don't give the good things of the children to the dogs. Now, of course, she came back with an excellent answer and said, "Hey, even the dogs get the crumbs off the table."
Yeah.
But but
Okay.
Jesus, and this wasn't just Jesus who had this idea. There was a superiority feeling among many Jews. Hey, we're the chosen people of God. The rest of you are just dogs. And again, Jesus indirectly used that, and he used it, I think, to press into this woman. But what do you think about that? About Jesus himself indirectly using this pejorative, I would call it a racial pejorative. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Amazing, Ed. I mean, this is a woman who was a Gentile woman. She was outside of God's chosen people. During that time, the whole goal of that time, though, and God with God's chosen people is they were supposed to make God known to everybody else so that everybody could be a part of God's chosen people. It started off as a choice between God and these people were supposed to extend that to other people. So, Ed, it is a completely backwards way for Jesus to say, do you want to be a part of this amazing community or not? And he does it by a very radical, very direct, I mean, it's seeming direct now that we understand the interpretation, but that is very confrontational to say, would you're a dog, you're outside of this. She improvs, she recognizes it, and it is more important to her. How would we know? How would Jesus know if this healing is truly important to this woman, if not to first push her away? Same thing
Yeah.
is true with the Samaritan woman, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Go
Yep.
tell your husband, go get your husband. You want eternal life? Go get your husband. And this
Awesome.
push truly shows if she does want to follow Jesus or if she does believe in Jesus or ultimately wants to be a part of God's people, because we see that all along, like at a principle level. When somebody wants something from God, when somebody wants something from Jesus, the first step is a push, because they need to find out, do you really want this?
Okay.
Is this something that you truly want? Because the only way is to do something that's difficult and uncomfortable that person needs to push through in order to show that. And in that moment, that was one of the ways that Jesus did that. I always say, how do you make a blind guy worse?
I'm just thinking this. I started
Right?
laughing.
Put some
I
How
know
you
his
mayonnaise on.
make
answer.
how you make a blind guy worse, Ed, is you rub dirt in
In
his
his eye.
eyes.
Right, exactly.
Right? That's how Jesus healed a blind guy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
How do you get how do you get a woman who is unclean healed? How does this happen? How does this healing occur? With a woman who is unclean pressing through a group of people to be healed. So my point would be, in my answer to that is, in that context, in that verse, Jesus is stating something she needs to push through
Mhm.
in order to show him that she truly wants this. And all of these miracles, all of these things that happen are on the outside, like of somebody doing something that is difficult and uncomfortable, pressing through to get the thing that they desire from God. So there is such a great reward for people like Rahab,
Mm.
who's outside the community. What happens to her? She she like saves the people.
Yep.
And now she's in the line of Jesus. She's
Right.
in the line
Right.
of Christ
A
because
foreigner.
of this. A
Mhm.
foreign woman.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
It's
foreigner. Yeah.
like
Right.
And
these stories
prostitute.
of these foreigners who are on the outside and how what it takes to pursue it, but then the blessing that
Yeah.
they get. Like in the New Jerusalem, when we get to talk to this woman who had that conversation with Jesus, she will forever be that woman who had
Yeah.
that conversation and responded in an amazing fashion. And so my point is that is I think that Jesus is doing this with us all the time.
Mm.
He's constantly putting these obstacles in our path to find out what it is we truly want. Are we going to press through that tension in that situation to be with him? It's like, what do we
Yeah.
value? Him or appearing like we're it successfully in God's chosen people? Or are we willing to be a dog, to be a flea, to be a gnat if it means to be, in the wings of the Almighty?
No, that's awesome. And I think, and who knows, perhaps racism is something that some people will have to push through because it is an obstacle. It's not there. God didn't put it there.
Right.
Just like, Jesus didn't put this infirmity on the woman, but it was something that was pushed through. So I think that's something we can maybe take and relate to our topic. Speaking of which, about people being, because there are different spectrums depending on where you are. For example, this country in America, it's still majority Caucasian. And so the power centers are there. But you go to another country where that they have a different racial majority, and they're going to be in positions of power. So that gets to what I want to call talk about the difference between racism as an institution and racism as an opinion. When I was in college, I went to a pretty liberal university, which is pretty much all of them these days. But there was I fell in with a group of very pro African American, politically, a group that was just very politically pro African American. And I remember sitting in on a debate between the leaders of this group and the leaders of the student body at my university, and those leaders happened to be mostly white, and they were each accusing the other of racism. So the black students were accusing the white students of racism because there weren't enough black people on the student board. But then the white students on the student board were accusing the black people of racism because they were saying, well, you guys are always saying these things about us. You're always calling us these names, these oppressor names, and we're not oppressing you. They were going back and forth. And the argument that one of the black students said, she said, well, black people, we can't be racist because we don't have the ability to enforce the institution of racism. We can be prejudiced. We can not like you because you're white, but we don't have the power to enforce institutional racism. So, so I guess my question is, was that a legitimate argument? Does it even matter? Is it just a circumstance of one group being in power? I mean, because maybe if we were in Nigeria, it would be the opposite. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that at all? Or
Yeah, I love what you're saying because I think if I was to argue her point, I understand like the institution, meaning like our is do these black people have enough influence in it, let's say in America, to be, you know, influencing the laws and regulations of the government that is, governing the people of America. I think that would probably be, sounds like that's more her point, is like, if racism is an institution, we can't be racist because we don't have power over the institution that we're all discussing.
Mhm.
But I think where I would say, if there's a flaw in her argument, and it's like I can agree with that. That's fine. That makes sense. Or at least I do what I can to understand her.
right.
But my follow-up question would be, does that institution and the prejudice that you've experienced as an effect of that institution
Mm,
make it right for you to also be prejudiced towards other people? Although
yeah.
you may not be able to influence an institution because you're a minority, does your prejudice towards even the people who are influencing the institution, does it give you a right to do that? So that's where, it's really these, you know I think a lot of times what happens is we do get injustice has happened to us, and I think because we're all made in God's image and we have this wiring within us of what it feels like when somebody's unfair towards us, our first instinct is to want to make it fair. So I would argue, if I'm trying to just be on this woman's side, I'm recognizing I think this resolution between an institution and an opinion is helpful, and then and also I guess I would start from a place of just trying to understand what that this woman is maybe not even expressing an injustice towards these people as much as she's trying to express an idea of how can we be more fair towards one another as a result of her feeling an injustice against herself. How can we be more fair? But I think I understand what you mean by the difference between institution and opinion.
Yeah.
I definitely think, I guess, who are the people making the decisions in the government? And that's definitely going to have a greater impact on the people within that ruling body, or the people who are being ruled over. So yeah, it makes sense to me. Those would be my initial thoughts on that.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it's valid too. I mean, I would want to basically, I just have a lot more questions, Ed.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the person where it's, to have equal representation, that is a solution.
Right. Yeah.
To what problem? And that's what I go, exactly. And that's what I go back to. It's like, okay, why do we want that? So we have equal representation, as many Black people as many white people, and that does what? And what if it doesn't? What about other races? Do other races need to be? Can it be just white people and just Black people? Or is there going to be another group that comes along? And now we have all these other groups that say there's only Black people and white people here. Listen, this is racist towards people who are Hispanic or people who are Asian. It's like, now this is what I mean, where we're causing more problems when we're fighting for, we need to have these two categories present. And I was go, for what reason? I just want to, and I would absolutely add, before I'm going to ask a million questions, I just make sure that I understand, her and what she was saying, and she feels heard, because to Joel's point, there's so much injustice that's going on that I have no idea about. And if somebody hasn't heard the injustice that somebody has experienced, I'd like to see what happens after that person feels heard. I think then take a step forward. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. No, I think you brought up a great point, because this is a solved problem. This is what you said at the very, very beginning of this episode. Just be nice. Just stop being racist. Just put more Black people on the board. That wouldn't dissolve the issue. That would cause more problems, because now that means you have to kick some of the white people off the board. So now they're going to be upset, and their people are going to be upset. So yeah, so we're going to get to some solutions and to some dissolved stuff. Because I think that's a prime example of how Saul is going to keep making these things worse. But I want to start thinking about the mentality of the people who hold some of these racial opinions. And here's something I've always found very tragically funny. And I've done a couple of, I wouldn't have, because I have my own podcast, a Faith by Reason podcast, with faithbyreason.net, plug there, shameless plug.
Love it.
Link in the description.
Love it. Link in the description.
And because when I was talking about this, when I did a series on creation versus evolution, and I talked a lot about evolution and how the mentality of evolution actually lends itself to racism, because if it's survival of the fittest, well, if we're in different categories, then by definition, one of those categories, at least one, has to be better or more superior than the other, because they're going to pass on their superior genes. So, and that's how I got to my statement on racism. The thing I find tragically funny is that if you talk to any racist, they all have one thing in common, no matter what color or nationality they are. Every racist, by some incredible coincidence, just happens to belong to the superior race. If you're a white racist, if you're a racist who's white, then you believe that white people are the superior race. If you're a Black racist, you believe that Blacks are the superior race. If you never hear anyone say, you never hear a white racist say, you know what, there's a superior race out there, and it's those Asians. No. So
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's
That
You
is
never,
awesome. Great point. It's
the
like
same
this.
thing happens in war, right?
yeah,
Everybody's always on the right side of a war. And
no one believes
And the
there's a
same,
villain.
and hey man,
no,
and the same thing with Calvinists. Like people predestined to go to heaven. Nobody has
why are the
grandchildren that are
Calvinists always
predestined
the
to go to
chosen?
hell. Right.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah,
Yeah.
buddy.
Where's the
Every-
Calvinist who knows that God didn't elect him?
Oh man, God didn't elect me. I know he didn't. And neither my grandson, right?
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh man.
Everyone is a hero of their own story, and no one is ever the villain, even though we know that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
So,
Oh
so
man.
getting to the, so I wanted to open it up to start talking about the mentality of the people, and I think really what it gets down to in my mind, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is comfort versus growth. I think when the people who are superior, whatever you go say I'm a racist. I believe that the black people are the superior race. We're superior. So that means people in my community, people who look like me, are better than everyone else. That provides a certain amount of comfort because I don't have to worry about, being less, or I don't have to worry about a whole lot of other things. I feel safe now, as opposed to if maybe someone else has different, more valuable characteristics than me, or another race has more valuable characteristics. Well, now I'm not safe. Now I'm going to need to press into them to get value from them. And I'll have that discomfort of growth. So tell me what you think about racism and racist as a in remaining there as a way to be comfortable and avoid growth.
Oh man, it
Yeah.
is. It's the same thing that I was saying about the Calvinists. God chose me for heaven, so therefore I'm good. I don't need to change my perspective. So if you are superior, then that means, what you do is you have to spend your whole life looking at other people and how they're worse. So what you do is you train your brain to basically look for the flaws in every other race or nationality, and you will most certainly find them because
Mhm.
that is how our brains naturally work. They're comparative. So I'm not looking to for naturally for a growth mindset because growth is difficult and it's uncomfortable and it's the opposite of the way our brains naturally work. So
Mhm.
naturally our brains are uh comparative and comfort focused.
Mhm.
That's just, like how our brains work is that our eye only sees a small section and then our brain fills in the whole picture. So I'm looking at my computer screen, I'm looking at this. My brain is kind of filling in the things around me. It's comparative. It's trying to give me a smooth experience.
Trying to make
So
sense of everything around it in as quickly or as efficiently as possible, right?
exactly. So for me, so that's where it's like if people are racist, people naturally do that. If people, think that they're the superior race, I sit there and I go, well, at the core of all of it, people want to be right.
Mhm.
And that's really like the main issue is much easier, Ed, for me to sit here and tell you all of the things that I've said that have just totally rocked during this interview. You know what? I could make a great list. That's some great points. Now, Jonathan, I have a question for you. How many things did you say wrong during the podcast?
Uh,
Uh, that's going to be much more difficult. I'm going an opposite way of what I naturally do.
mm,
So this is about human beings naturally easily wanting to be right versus they, thinking about ways that you could be wrong and grow. And you're either perfect or you are wrong and you fix it, and that's how you grow. So
mm,
the first step in growth is admitting that you're wrong and finding a wrong belief in you and changing it. And I don't know about you, Ed, but I don't see many human beings walking around going, "Oh yeah, I was wrong." Let me
yeah,
easily and freely admitting that they were wrong about things.
yeah, unless you're a married man, then you have to do that as a matter of course. But
Rightly
but
so, huh?
yeah, right, and rightly
Yeah.
so. So I want to follow up on that thought because I think we can agree here on this podcast that comfort pursuing comfort is not a good thing. It's not going to it's not going to make your life better.
Yeah,
However,
long
I
term,
think
it's going to end in destruction. Yeah.
right.
Right.
But I think we hopefully can all agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we all do want to feel safe. I think that is also something that is not a bad thing to feel safe. But and as I said, some for many racists, being in that community and feeling that they are in a community that is better than everyone else makes them feel safe. So how do you think we can combat that racism and still make people feel safe? Or can we?
Yeah, I think, well, the communities, I think what's happening is, um like, I absolutely agree with everything Jonathan shared as far as this desire to be right, and especially to not be wrong. I also think, a lot of this comes back to nature versus nurture. Naturally, we're all racist, meaning
Mm,
naturally we do analyze people's and information, and we categorize people into certain groups. That's natural. The nurture, though, is where when people will say no one's born racist, people are taught to be racist, right? When it's like, well, we know there's some complexity to that statement. It's not fully true unless you understand what I would say. I agree with that if you're saying consciously taught. Okay? Based on how I'm raised, I'm maybe being shown through the people raising me or my friends, or the people that are influencing my life, how to treat other people who are different from me. That's what the nurture side of this. That's what I'm being taught. But that can go both ways, right? I can be taught, like you're saying, if I stick with this community, if I keep this tribal mentality, is where I feel safe.
mm,
So, which we know, feeling safe and feeling comfortable, they may be connected, but they're not mutually exclusive. And being comfortable might make you feel safe, but you might be unsafe.
mm,
Where I would say being safe might make you feel comfortable, but it isn't always going to be comfortable. So really what I would say, how do we be safe and be able to, and be able to deal with this topic of racism, or deal with other people who maybe believe differently than us? I think safety really comes down to not being enabled down a bad path. So that's where, in order to be safe, we actually do need to be around people who can help us. And feel like, again, feeling safe doesn't mean I am safe,
yeah.
because I could be around people who are enabling me into a flawed mentality, which is
Sure.
actually an unsafe and long-term destructive mentality to have. So that's where I'd say, how do we really be safe? It is everything we lined out in season 7. It's like, this is how you're safe. It doesn't mean you're not going to be uncomfortable. It means if you discuss these topics in the fashion that we've described, you're going to be able to deal with that discomfort without being judged, without being hurt, without being abused, and with learning something. If you make it through this discussion, you're going to learn something new. Something is going to happen to you to help you grow as a person. So I would say, if anything, safety goes more in line with, or is more important as it relates to discomfort than it does to comfort.
Mm,
We can pursue safety. We should be pursuing safety. And that should be me being around people who are strong enough to help me grow as a person. So as we say, God is a strong tower. He's a place of refuge because he can help us, not because he's enabling us, but because he can help us. It's like, we want to be a safe church or a safe community. I want to be a safe person. I'm not safe to my son just because I help him feel safe. I'm safe because if he's in trouble, I can help him. I can help him get through that. I can help him grow into the person who can stand in the midst of that garbage. So that's really what I think, where we're creating these communities where people feel safe is great. We should. But what is our strategy for helping them feel safe? Is it remove anything that's uncomfortable? Or do we help them learn how to deal with the discomfort in a way where they can still keep their thought process, where they're not hurting one another, and where they're open to hearing perspectives that maybe they don't hold to be true?
This is what
wow.
I love about what Joel did, Ed, is he just unlumped being safe with being comfortable.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that what happens with people is that they put those two things
Mhm.
in the same category. If I'm safe, then that means I can be comfortable.
Mm.
That's like I'm comfortable, so I'm going to eat all of this junk food and I'm just going to pound all of this fast food. Am I safe now? Is that a safe thing to do? Not at all.
No.
Because what we're saying is that the limitation of safety is people should be safe enough. Why? To grow.
Safe to
Safe
grow.
enough
Yeah.
to learn. So my
Yeah.
argument, Ed, for people that say, I am safe within my race or
Mhm.
my race is superior. What they are doing is I don't actually think that they're being safe.
Mm. Okay.
They are not, they're coming up with a rationalization and an excuse not to learn. They're saying that my learning and my stops right here with these people. And it's the same mentality that gangs have.
Yep.
You come into the gang, we got your back.
Right.
Why? Because we're going to indoctrinate you with all of these things. And that's where it's like, are we talking about, there's a community and then there's a gang of people. Gangs
Yeah.
are unsafe. But communities should grow and they should be, there should be constant learning
Adding
and constant
benefit to
growth.
people outside of their community. That's a
Yeah.
Right.
community would bring a benefit to people outside that community.
Nice.
So then, so then would a dissolve for this be, if I'm understanding correctly, if you were getting your value from this community that's based on something as superficial as what you look like, and you feel safe because you get your value there, then if you were taught to get your value or to recognize your own value, your own unique value, then you could feel safe because I don't need a community to feel valuable. I have intrinsic value, and I can take that intrinsic value with me no matter where I go, even if I go to a community or if I go to an area where I don't have a community. Does that sound?
Oh yeah, and you should
Yeah.
be giving your value, and that's how it ought to work. Is that you find your intrinsic value, you discover that, you discover how you're unique from everybody, even in an immediate like your family or whatever. And what you do is you're supposed to get that energy and that value. You're supposed to give that value to the people around you. And then, like Joel said, those people around you should all give their value to each other and then outside of the community. So the value is increasingly generated with all the exchanges between the people, but you have
Mm,
to have it in order to give it. And that is another reason
Nice.
why it's not safe for a community of people to find value in each other. Because Ed, if you and I are in the same group, then my value is in you being there with me, then
mhm.
you are the reason for that my value and I take value from you.
Wow.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
don't need to
Ooh,
give you anything.
wow. That's
So therefore, we
awesome.
are we are slowly killing our community because we're finding only value in each other and not in ourselves.
So that's awesome. So I want to address one more topic and then I want to get to the dissolve. So this question is about people who benefit from racism. We just talked about some people who quote unquote can benefit from it because it'll make you, if maybe you don't feel good about yourself, but you can feel good about being a part of the community. I remember someone, I forget the exact circumstances, but maybe have been a comedian who said this, like, if that you have a truck driver from Iowa who happens to be white and says, I'm superior to other races because Thomas Edison invented the light bulb and he was white. And the comedian was like, well, yeah, Thomas Edison was brilliant. You're a truck driver. How does
Okay.
how does his brilliance like come to you by osmosis? Like,
Right.
I'm
How do
African
you have a
American.
share in that?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm African American, and so is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan could dunk from the free throw line. If I jumped as high as I could, you could maybe slide a credit card underneath my feet. I don't get benefit from that, but that's some of the value that we just talked about that they get from it. However, I want to talk about some value that people get who from the institution of racism on both sides, because there are some people who only live, who only exist, who only benefit from it. I mean, you can talk about people who are in political positions who benefit from there being racism. Like whenever there's, I'll name names. Whenever there's a racist incident, who do you see? You see Jesse Jackson, you see Al Sharpton, you see these guys who would not exist in the public sphere without racism. On the other hand, you have guys like David Duke who come in from the other side, who again, if there was no racism, these guys would be working at a car wash somewhere. So they get benefit from it. And also, I think certain institutions can benefit from it. And I think one of the main institutions that benefit from just categorizing people and suppressing uniqueness are governments and corporations. Because I have a series on Faith by Reason where I talk about the origin of human government and the reason behind it. And the reason, my thesis is that the reason behind human government is to suppress uniqueness. Because Jehovah's original plan was for us all to be kings and queens. We were all supposed to be leaders. We were all supposed to be have our own little our plot of land and be the kings and queens of our own area and have that kind of greatness. Greatness is comes from your uniqueness, so that we can all be great because we are all unique, and there's no one on earth that can bring to the table what I bring, what Joel brings, what Jonathan brings, what everyone listening brings. So we can all be great. However, government says, nah, only a few people can be great. Only the people who are presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, CFOs, they can be great. But the rest of you have to not be great. And the only way to suppress that greatness is to suppress uniqueness. So, I know I just said a lot there. And so what are your thoughts on people who can benefit from this categorization? And maybe then we can talk about how to dissolve some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the biggest flaw is a lot of these people benefiting from it are benefiting at the expense of people, right? That's where it's, it definitely isn't going to be a generative community that lasts forever. That's why you can see all these empires that have been, world powers over history. None of them exist anymore. It's like there's a new world power at best every 300 years, right? There's this cycle of we going at this style of government where the institution gains at the expense of its people will not survive longer than 300 to 500 years, whatever. And I'm just spitballing here, but I think where they can benefit from it, though, I guess what I would say a different point of view on this whole thing. Like you bring up Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. It's like we need doctors working in hospitals. We wish there weren't hospitals where people needed to get hurt and were sick and had illness that needed to get healed and repaired. But there is a need for that. So we do have doctors and we're grateful for them. But we try to live a life, and the best doctors are the ones who aren't going to just fix the symptoms, but are going to give the advice on how we can live our lives in a way where we'll prevent having to go back to the hospital. Where I see Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson the same way. It's like, I'm not so bothered that these guys have thrived over the racism issue. There is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think it's great for the African American community to have spokesmen to be able to stand and to be able to maybe address some of the issues. My question would be, though, is what is their approach to how do you help people make the right move? It's like, it's not enough to just say, yeah, the system's flawed. The institutions are failing us. It's great to have somebody in a high-powered, high-influential position to be able to say that to the other people leading the institution, the other politicians, for Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson to get the attention of the presidents and congressmen and senators and all these other white people to say, hey, there is an issue, but then what? Now what? And that's where I think the system has failed. And I don't know, I can't speak to Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson specifically, but I can say there still is racism. So nobody's really given the right answer yet, or at least nobody's instituted or applied it to where racism's dissolved. So that's where it's like, I get there are people who benefit off of the institution being the way it is, just like a hospital benefits off of sick people. But I would hope that institution would be set up to learn to help people be impacted in a way where eventually, so like here, Ed, it's like is the institution itself set up in a way to dissolve itself when it's no longer needed? Like the best hospital is going to be the one that is dissolved because they've helped people be healthy enough to not have to come back because they're not sick anymore.
Yeah, right.
Music of Life Church, me and Jonathan talk about this all the time. Music of Life Church is set up in a way where we are working ourselves out of business.
Mm.
We're trying to help people in a way where they won't have to come back to Music of Life Church because people won't be being hurt by church anymore. So I think that could be the same way. It's like, is Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson or people on any side of the same argument, are they helping their people in a way where their job isn't needed anymore, where they won't need to be a spokesperson for this issue anymore?
And I have severe doubts about that, but I don't know them personally. I only know about them.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the problems. I think we've kind of done that to death. Let's talk about how about dissolve. How do we Tell me about some dissolve solutions for racism? And I think we've probably touched on them here and there, but let's encapsulate how we dissolve racism.
Yeah, we have to go back to something that is unique about every single individual. We talk about dissolve, and that's how God addresses every problem. Dissolve is looking at the intangible, the non-physical cause of the issue and repairing that. That's the way God looks at everything. God is God is spiritual. He looks at everything. It was in the beginning God, and then he spoke and something tangible happened. So that's the way God looks at everything. And I think that's what the three of us are trying to do with everything that we're facing, is to go back to the intangible beginning or the start of every single problem. And when it comes to human beings, the way to dissolve all of this is to go back to, well, what is a human being? What does it mean to be a human being? Because that's
Nice.
something that all of us as people share. And we need to go back to the intangible cause or the start of who that person is. And we need to be able to identify that. We need to be able to look and say, there's got to be a unique way. There's got to be a unique something in everybody to look up to. There's got to be a way, because, and especially, this is what I love. This is what I love about being a believer in Jesus and loving the Bible, is that this is the mega cheat codes of all of it. This is the humanity's cheat codes, is to go, you are the body of Christ. Wait, and the eye cannot say that to the hand that I have no need of you. Because, or the hand cannot say to the eye, I have no need of you, because if there was no eyes, then we couldn't see.
Right.
So there's always this way, like we talked about in the very beginning, the XY axis. There is always a way for all of the body parts to look up to one another, but they are spiritual and intangible. So we need to have a way that we can get at and explain that about people. And there's no better person to describe that than Joel.
Well, we linked in the description of the episode, the podcast, as our motivational spiritual gifts. That's like the most basic way that we can help anybody determine what their uniqueness is, and that's really what we're doing here. So yeah, people need to listen to that episode, and it's a great resource, and we have ways that people can not only identify who they are and are created uniquely to be. It also helps them be able to start discovering who the other people in their lives are too, and then you can start adjusting how you're treating each other based off of that uniqueness instead of based off of physical attributes, whatever, what have you. But that's where I think this all gets dissolved with uniqueness, and I love it. I think it was Jonathan when he ends the episode, the racism episode. The dissolve is simply this idea of being able to look past the physical attributes of a person into the spiritual uniqueness of the individual. And because every single person was formed uniquely, the uniqueness of a person cannot be categorized because every person is the only version of themselves. That's how we dissolve racism. Now, one of the things I love about the whole motivational spiritual gifts thing is when we're helping people discover these things, the way we discover it is even proof that we're looking past the physical. So our friend John, our producer, he was the first one I heard, and I saw do this illustration. He's like, when we're helping people discover who they are, we walk them through this little quiz and we give them answers to a conflict that happens. And what we're looking for is what their answer is to how would you handle this conflict? And what we're saying is, what effect would you want to have on other people? Let's say if you spilled a cup of coffee, if you saw someone spill a cup of coffee, what effect would you want to have on people in that scenario? So I'm looking at Jonathan and I'm saying, Jonathan, I dropped a cup of coffee. What would your response be? And then what I'm looking for is what effect he would want on the conflict. The conflict's over here. So I have to go like this. And instead of looking at Jonathan and finding out about Jonathan, in order to understand what's in him uniquely, I have to look the other way. I have to look at the effect Jonathan wants to have on the situation. That's how that's the way we've been helping people discover their uniqueness, is not looking at Jonathan. How do you look past the physical? It's like I'm looking away from Jonathan and I'm looking at the effect he wants to have on other people. I can't see his race if I'm looking this way, can I? All I can see is the unique value that he brings to the world.
Right.
Spiritual, intangible. That's incredible.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up by just summarizing. So racism is based on the physical. It's based on taking and not giving. It's based on fear. It's based on ignorance or lack of knowledge and comfort. So then the opposite would be to focus on the intangible instead of the physical, to focus on value instead of fear. Instead of fearing what you're lacking, learn your own value. And then you're no longer taking, now you're giving your value. And now that you have no more fear and now you know your value, now you can step into growth.
Jeez.
Well, I just learned
summary. Quite the spectrum of a scale there, from racism to uniqueness, really.
It's a much better answer than stop being racist, Ed.
Oh, no kidding.
or just hire more people who don't look like you.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
amazing.
Because that's just addressing the physical.
And yes, it is.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for an incredible conversation. I hope that everyone who's listening and watching learned something. If you didn't, I don't know what to tell you, because I learned something.
Yeah,
I learned a lot.
Too.
And this is incredible. So for Pastor Joel and Pastor Jonathan, I'm Ed Mabrie. Thank you for listening and watching. And we will talk to you next time and make sure you check out What the Flock and Music of Life Church. And you guys, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, check out one more plug on your website, Ed.
Yes, faithbyreason.net is my website and my ministry. When I'm trying to make it make sense. That's what it's all about on Faith by Reason. My goal is to help Christians understand why what they believe makes sense using logic, reason, and very, very deep systematic micro analysis.
Love it. Great. Yeah. This was a pleasure, Ed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a great interview.
Thank you so much, Ed. We had a blast.
Yeah. Same here. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.